This is Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom. Words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I trust that you'll consider this your vitamin and supplement for your heart and mind. And wherever you receive podcasts, would you please subscribe to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom and leave a brief rating and a review, and it would be exceedingly helpful. I trust you're having a good day today. I want to talk about a subject that's a little different than the normal kinds of things we talk about. I want to talk about a word that is very, very important, the word vulnerability. Whether you're a leader, a follower, or anywhere in between, vulnerability is something that is rarely discussed. Rarely do you see blog articles, books. I've never seen a webinar on how to be more vulnerable. As a matter of fact, we pretty much work the opposite, to do all we can to not be vulnerable. But I think it is a sign of success when you learn to harness vulnerability. Now, I didn't say victim, I said be vulnerable. Oftentimes, too many people love playing the victim. But what I'm talking about is, are you willing to be authentic? Are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you willing to just be who you are? First of all, most people associate vulnerability with weakness, but you can be both strong and vulnerable. Now, I'm not indicating that one must tell their dirty laundry everywhere they go, but I do think it is a life skill, and I do think it's something important for leaders, and it's something that will make us much more effective. I obviously come from a Christian worldview. I have been a pastor. I work with churches, and vulnerability is at the heartbeat of the Christian faith. So I want to give us some ways in which we can develop vulnerability. And the first is to be sensitive to the vulnerable people around us and be sensitive to where you are right now in your life. You see, life really isn't about winning or losing. It's about being the best that we can be with where we are, what we have to work with, blessings from the Lord. It's not about winning or losing, and really to be vulnerable is to be a courageous person. All of us have hurts in our lives. All of us have suffered betrayal. All of us have had disappointments. Many of you have tried out for positions and it didn't work out, and you weren't the one to get the promotion, and it left you feeling exceedingly vulnerable. Some of you have been hurt by people in positions of authority and trust, and they broke that trust, and deep inside of you is locked away a lot of hurt. And so here's what I say. Let's just start with anyone who's in a leadership position, whether it's in your family, your church, your organization, or where you work. The first thing is, let's start being sensitive to the people around us. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. Matter of fact, it was C.S. Lewis who said, to love at all is to be vulnerable. I'm wondering if that isn't some of the difficulties that happen in love relationships and in marriages, is that one or more sides are not even willing to be vulnerable, to be open. Because most of us are afraid. We want this desire. We have this desire to be safe and secure. And if I just get this relationship going, if I just get that promotion, if I just get that position, if I get that degree, if I get X amount of dollars in the bank, then I will have security. Can I let you in on a little secret? Security is mostly a myth. So the first way to develop vulnerability and to be open to the vulnerabilities of those around us is just to be sensitive. Oftentimes we rush into conversations, we rush into circumstances like a bull in the china shop. Let's be sensitive. The second thing, if we are going to harness our own vulnerability and help others with theirs, is we need to be confidential. Unfortunately, there are people who love talking with people for nothing more than to receive information and allow it to become fodder for the gossip mill, to then hurt other people with it, because there is this idea information is power, and I know something about you that others don't know, and that puts me as an authority figure when I'm having a conversation. There are some people in this world whose tongues are loose at both ends and tied in the middle. But if you're going to be a person who helps people, who encourages people, who is able to deal with your own vulnerability and try to help walk others through it, you are going to have to be a person of confidence who keeps confidences. The third thing, when you're dealing with your own vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities and hurts of others, is you need to get yourself prepared. Now, I've already declared I have a Christian worldview. I'm a Christ follower. And there are lots of times as you hear these particular stories or you work through your own, it's not a pleasant experience. There are things you hear that times from other people that are hard to hear. And if you have any empathy whatsoever, there is that tendency to enter into it. Now, leaders, rarely do you hear anyone talking about being vulnerable and being empathetic, but I think it increases your stock as a leader if you share your own vulnerability at times, which will then make us sensitive to the hurts and the vulnerabilities of people all around us. But get yourself prepared. You'll have to prepare yourself mentally. You will especially have to prepare yourself emotionally. And again, if you're a Christ follower, you're going to need to prepare yourself spiritually. You're going to need to get yourself prepared because there's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of pain and there's a lot of stuff in people's lives. But maybe we could be the one. Think about it. The possibility of the hurts and things that we have had, and when we make ourselves vulnerable, we are in a great position to come alongside and to help others. As a matter of fact, vulnerability, to be a vulnerable person, takes as much courage as anything I can think of. To share what's on your heart. Now, obviously, you can't share everywhere you go, and there are times when it is wholly inappropriate to share every ugly detail of something. But I'm praying that you'll find someone that you can trust to kind of offload some of that. And leaders, if you really want to make yourself indispensable, become that kind of a person. You see, vulnerability is nothing more than showing up and telling your story. And secondly, showing up and listening to someone else's story. Some of us like to tell our story. We're not as hot on listening to the other story. So be prepared. The next thing is, let's go back to the talking and the listening ear to someone who is sharing their problem or their vulnerability. Don't interrupt. Now, I may not be giving this for anyone else but myself. It almost seems as if I was born talking and I love to talk. But as I have gotten older, I have realized I never learned anything that I can think of while I was talking. But I have learned a lot by listening. And as someone is sharing sometimes exceedingly painful things, the worst thing that I can do is to interrupt them or to go off on a tangent. The only time you should interrupt is for clarification, and you should keep that at an absolute minimum. Let them, you've allowed them to show up and to tell their story. Don't interrupt them. This is a part of what they need to do, and they need you to be a listener. The next one is much like everything else we've talked about. Be caring. Be empathetic. Even if you can't relate to every possible thing that has gone wrong in their life, you can be caring. Even the greatest leaders that I have known, one of their attributes is they have been caring. You see, being vulnerable really means being open. And I'm amazed that sometimes in the area where I've been most of my life in the Christian church, that where we should give people space for grace and where it should be an open and welcoming environment where people, when they share their vulnerabilities, oftentimes it's as though we continue to bury those things and to hide them. But if you're going to make it in this world, and if you're going to make it as a leader or anything else, you have to be open. To be vulnerable opens the door. I know it opens the door to be further hurt, but if you don't open the door, there's no further help either. Now, I know the Holy Spirit can help us. I know that sometimes we can work our own way through it. I get all of that. But oftentimes we need someone to come alongside. And we're not going to get the help we need unless we are committed to being vulnerable and to being open and to allow the door to be open for someone to come alongside and walk through the valley with us. And so don't interrupt and be a caring person. And caring isn't something you can fake. You either are or you aren't. And the person who is being open and vulnerable will be able immediately to tell whether you're just acting like you're a caring person or whether deep from within you are a caring person. The next one is a one that I'm going to need to explain, and that is when people are being vulnerable and open to you, you have to listen hard. Now, there is a time when we're listening to people and our mind is wandering, and oftentimes we're thinking, what is the most brilliant thing I can say? What is the magical words that I can say to bring healing and peace and comfort? And oftentimes we miss out on what the most important thing we are giving someone, and that is the gift of our presence and the gift of our time of saying, I know you've been hurt. I know things haven't gone well for you, but you matter, and you matter so much, I'm willing to invest my time with you because you are that valuable. Listen hard. When people are open and vulnerable, oftentimes it's not just what they're saying, it's what they've left unsaid. It's their body language. It's the story behind the story. And basically, I could have said it differently rather than listening hard. Concentrate, focus, be prayerful. But this is their time. They're talking to you, and you need to listen to their story and let them be vulnerable. The other thing I would say is there will come a time for you to speak. And this is probably initially not the time to say, I want to give you 5 things that will help you be a more confident person, or these 6 things to get past your past. Now, I have written articles like that and recorded podcasts on those subjects. There's a time for that. But initially, when someone has given us the gift of being open and honest and vulnerable with us, is the time for us to speak healing to them. Our words are important. Our words have the power to heal or to hurt. And there are times when we don't I'm not saying when we speak healing, hey, you think you had problems, let me share my problems with you. There'll be a time for that. But that's not healing. That's one-upmanship. Speaking healing is things as along the line of, that sounds like a horrible, hurtful thing that's almost unimaginable to me. And you need some accolades today for being a survivor, for getting through that, for being as far along as you are. And I want you to know, I want to speak healing into you. You are a child of God. You matter. If you're the boss, if you're the leader, you matter to our company. You matter to our not-for-profit. You matter to our church. You matter to our family. You matter to me as my friend. And how much farther so many people would be down the road if we began to speak healing into the lives of others. Never underestimate the wonderful gift that people give us of being open. And then I want to turn it around for a moment. Leader, are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you quit Are you willing to not be the sage on the stage with all of the answers? Are you willing to say, there are areas in my life I struggle with, and there are things in my life that aren't easy for me to do, and there are times that I fall down, and there are times that I get off track, and there are things in my life that have not worked out. I don't mean that every moment you open your mouth, you tell that kind of a story. But if you want to create an authentic, honest, and open workplace, family, church, support group, whatever it is, it starts with you, my friend, taking that first step. Rod Laver, an Australian who was a famous tennis player, said this statement that I want to leave you with. The time you are the most vulnerable is when you are ahead. You're not losing. Many of us feel when we have these feelings of vulnerability that somehow something's gone wrong in our lives. We're the only person this has ever happened to. And it was Rod Laver that said, the time when you're feeling the most vulnerable is when you're winning. It's when you're ahead. And then he gives this advice: don't let up. I know that today on this podcast, there are some of you, and today there are people watching on Facebook Live. Many of my friends on Facebook Live think this is the podcast. This is not the podcast. The podcast is totally audible. But the time you are most vulnerable, and maybe you're going through that time right now, it's not the time that you're losing. It's the time you're ahead. You're winning. Don't let up. Don't go back into your world and shrink away. Don't go home and close the doors and pull the curtains and give up. Because your time of vulnerability is the time when you're ahead, when the little voices are saying, quit, give up. No, don't do that. You're ahead. Don't let up. Let's create, in all of our workplaces, in all of our homes, in all of our churches, an open and honest place where all of us can be vulnerable, and rather than judging and criticizing and destroying and eating one another, we can use this as strength that will move our families, ourselves, our organizations farther. If you're broken and you allow yourself to be healed in those broken places, broken bones become stronger at the place where they are broken. So how do we create a culture of vulnerability and openness? Let's be sensitive to others. When people share things with us, let's be confidential. Be mentally, emotionally, and more importantly, spiritually prepared, because there's a lot of junk out there. When someone is pouring out their heart, sharing, giving you the gift of being open and honest and vulnerable with you, don't interrupt them. Be and develop the habit of being a caring person. You can be a vulnerable and a caring person and still be a strong leader. They are not exclusive. They go hand in hand. And when people are talking to you, focus on them, listen hard, and make sure you don't leave the time with that person without speaking healing into their life. And remember, the time you're most vulnerable, you're not losing, you're winning, you're ahead. And don't let up. You've been listening to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I trust today this has been like a vitamin or a supplement for your heart and mind. And hey, I'm looking to help the next generation and the next level of leaders, whether it's with anything that we talk about on this podcast. And if you'd like to set up a phone call to see if there's a possibility of us working together, would you go to drronblake.com/call, drronblake/call, and you'll fill out a little bit of information. You'll get on my calendar, and I'll call you, and we'll see what there might be some possibilities of us being a help, me being a help, and us working together. Again, leader, you are doing better than you think you are. And why don't you today start practicing being open and honest and vulnerable with the people you love? Again, until next time, this is Dr. Ron saying, have a great and blessed day.